Brad Pitt to secure permanent access to Angelina Jolie's vagina? By FCM. Are Angelina Jolie and Brad Pitt finally getting married? If so, what are the implications of this for her? Historically, women don't fare well under this arrangement after all, especially when it ends. Women are often left unsupported and destitute, with too many kids to take care of and not enough time and resources to do anything well, including taking care of their own needs. Of course, being that she is extremely wealthy and has the lifetime earning potential of 1,000 Western mortals, Angelina Jolie is somewhat insulated from some of the harms of marriage traditionally suffered by women, as a sexual class around the world. But there is one that even she cannot escape, isn't there? And that's the fact that marriage is a legal status, not just a social or religious one. No woman is above the law, not even Angelina Jolie. That's right. And since marriage is a legal status, there are laws that come into play when it begins, and once married to a man, there are legal consequences to women who do not continuously and regularly submit to PIV with their husbands. So let's congratulate the happy couple. Let the coercive PIV begin. Obviously, there are religious and social expectations at play here when discussing consummated versus unconsummated marriages. Romantic two-person couplings, heterosexual or not, might decline in sexual frequency and intensity over time, and some may never have been that sexually driven in the first place. But the notion of a sexless marriage or long-term relationship that was never sexual at all is unfathomable to most people, isn't it? And in the case of heterosexual couples, PIV is specifically indicated. Luckily, I suppose, Angelina and Brad will never be suspected of an alternative relationship that's not based in sexual relations, seeing as how they had at least one unintended pregnancy from engaging in PIV-centric sex and have had another pregnancy, wanted, unwanted, or otherwise, after that. But it's not just religious and social expectations or even desire that keep women having PIV with their husbands. Terrifyingly, the law appears to require this too. Regarding consummating marriage, if there is some defect that prevents a married heterosexual couple from having PIV, the marriage can be annulled. What constitutes a defect is presumably up to men and their legal system. After all, they made up the whole thing to benefit themselves. Which makes one wonder, what would they consider a defect? What would they consider having PIV even? Let me guess. Full acceptance of the length of the shaft of the penis for enough duration that the man can ejaculate? Yes, that sounds about right. We won't even pretend that the legal definition of heterosexual sex means something other than PIV. Of course it means PIV. Heterosexual sex and PIV are interchangeable always, except in radfem discourse. In the case of vaginismus, which of these illustrations, if either of them, would constitute a defect so that the woman could have the marriage annulled if she wanted to, or if the man wanted to change his mind and leave her for not fucking him? The pain lines indicate pain. In the first frame, which looks painful for both parties, the bent penis made me laugh out loud. We have no penetration at all. Defect? I'm thinking yes. In the second frame, we have full or mostly full penetration, or envelopment, or whatever. That causes pain for one or both parties. Defect? If the woman was in excruciating pain but the man wasn't, this would probably count as PIV, wouldn't it? Especially if she tolerated it for long enough for him to ejaculate. Fine, no problem. Marriage saved. In the case of Brangelina, they don't have obvious issues here, although the unobviousness of female pain and non-sex from the female perspective in the second frame is chilling, isn't it? So let's move on to the issue of not fucking your husband enough. Yes, that's right. You don't just have to do it once, although that's the first requirement. You might have to keep doing it. In the states that enumerate grounds for divorce as opposed to no-fault divorce, abandonment by not fucking enough is enough to get you fired. Enough to get your husband out of his obligations as your husband, and to remove the protections of marriage from you. Women living in one of these states who are sick of being pronged and calling it sex, perhaps better have that second glass of wine after all. From the article, quote, abandonment and desertion are closely related to no-fault grounds that allow divorce after a husband and wife have lived apart from one another for a certain period of time. In a no-fault divorce, neither spouse is blamed for the failure of the marriage. No-fault divorces are allowed in every state and the District of Columbia. Specific acts that are considered to be abandonment or desertion vary under state laws. In addition to physical separation for a specific time period, some states consider failure to provide financial support for a spouse or refusal to engage in sexual intercourse without a good reason to be abandonment or desertion. Close quote. Okay, so what's a good reason? And don't forget, men made all of this up to benefit themselves. So, is painful intercourse a good enough reason? Fear of unwanted pregnancy or inability or unwillingness to use birth control by either party? Emerging radical feminist consciousness where PIV is seen to be oppressive and uniquely interpersonally and structurally harmful to females? Not likely. That last one even made me laugh with extra cynicism. I mean, really, can you imagine? No matter how much money a woman has, or success, or anything, and no matter how much she loves her husband, or doesn't, or wants to have PIV with him, or doesn't, all women are at the mercy of men and the male legal system at all times, including what the law says about marriage and what it requires as far as PIV and PIV-centric sexuality. The bizarreness and misogyny of this is not mitigated by the fact that it depends somewhat on where you live. These laws vary by state, giving men more or less access to women's vaginas as a matter of right, and more or less coercion of women to fuck when they don't want to fuck. Which means it's completely arbitrary, and that marriage has nothing to do with PIV or PIV-centric sexuality inherently. It has exactly as much to do with it as men and their legal systems say it does at any moment in time, which is terrifying, because this means they can change the rules. They have complete control over the access to female bodies. Not us, and not even Angelina Jolie can escape. Congratulations on your engagement, I guess. 12 comments. Katie S. says, when I saw the diagrams, along with thinking about getting a marriage annulled for non-PIV, I thought of Sylvia Plath's novel, The Bell Jar, where she loses her virginity and she hemorrhages severely, etc. It seemed to me that this was about the sacrifice of women to PIV. Some women are expecting some kind of enlightenment through PIV, and it turns out to be a life-threatening experience. This novel is brilliant relative to themes of PIV. FCM says, Hi Katie. As for expectations and sacrifice, I can report that I expected that PIV would be many things that it wasn't. Tremendously gratifying, explosively orgasmic, way better than non-PIV, etc., and it never was. I first had PIV at 19, so I had plenty of non-PIV experiences before that with which to compare PIV, and PIV never stood up. Not when I was 19 or ever. And I always feared pregnancy and disease, and rape. But these things were never taken seriously by any sexual partner I ever had. Ha! Big surprise, right? So there is very much a conditioning and a grooming that must take place for women to start seeing PIV like men see it, as sex, i.e., it feels good, or at the very least, it's more pleasurable than it is dangerous. But for women, that's not true, is it? Shockingly, there was a morsel of useful info on the Vaginismus website regarding this conditioning and grooming. Seriously, I was shocked to see this. Quote, Sex is an activity involving many complex conditioned responses. Bodies do not start out as skilled reactors to sexual stimulus. Successful intercourse is learned through experience and interaction. The nervous system and musculature discover and remember what feels good, works, and what isn't comfortable. Normally, the transition to intercourse becomes more pleasurable after the first few experiences. The mind and body allow entry and learn to anticipate intercourse positively. Healthy massages result and they generate arousal in anticipation of intercourse. In a woman with primary vaginismus, the mind and body never get the chance to be trained through positive intercourse experiences. The process of learning how to have successful intercourse is cut short when the vaginal muscles spasm as a protective device against pain. With the absence of any direct conscious control on the woman's part, nerves controlling the vaginal muscles react to the anticipation of intercourse as a call to tightly constrict, brace, protect, and guard against the onset of potential penetration pain. Close quote. Of course, their solution is to sell women on PIV, instead of challenging the assumption that PIV is sex, and to sell women vaginal dilation kits, like fucking trans women dilating their fake fuckholes for intercourse with men. I could do a whole post just taking down vaginismus.com. YTTIK says, interesting article. I thought they were already married. I guess I'm out of the loop. I've never been able to understand annulment. You can actually have intercourse and yet still the marriage is viewed as not having been consummated. People even can get annulments after having had children. It all varies from country to country, of course, and has legal and religious interpretations, in some places one and the same. Naturally, it's almost always male-defined. I've never been able to understand any of it. And I know in my state it's still legal to rape your wife, you just can't use a weapon. First-degree rape is illegal. Other kinds of rape still carry a marriage exemption here. Oh goodness, you really could do a whole post on vaginismus. I just read, quote, this is a highly frustrating condition as a lot of people, including doctors, may comment on her motives, close quote. Her motives? You mean she might be conspiring in some sort of elaborate plot to deny a male his rightful entitlement? It doesn't even occur to anybody that this might be a physical response she can't control. But even if she was motivated to have this condition to avoid intercourse, that should be her right. Millie, what can I say? Excellent post, FCM, and ouch, those pictures made me squirm. Quote, sex is an activity involving many complex conditioned responses, close quote. The truth will out, eh? Speaking as someone who was successfully conditioned to enjoy PIV, to find cunnilingus weird and distressing and to enjoy giving blowjobs, I can only just barely dream my way out of this mess. The law need not be applied, even arbitrarily. Social conditioning and then sexual conditioning is enough for PIV enforcement to feel inescapable. PIV and marriage goes together like a horse and carriage? C says, has anyone read Bryce Courtney's book, Fishing for Stars? The main female character is trained as a geisha to please men in every way except PIV, which she is conditioned by her master to believe is sacred, i.e., it's commodified as precious goods or a rare delicacy to make its ultimate taking more pleasurable for the man. She is so fiercely protective of her virginity that she murders a man who tries to take it from her. But then her lover spends the rest of the novel trying to cure her of her subsequent and lifelong vaginismus because he wants to finally possess her by perforating her hymen. She's able to please him because of all her geisha training. Phew! But it's the forbidden fruit he wants. Never mind that he claims to love her and she is a victim of sex slavery. Anyway, in the end, she is so sad that she can't physically let him fuck her that she gives him the greatest gift of all and grants him permission to fuck another woman. Need I say more? Lucky Nickel says, I thought they were married too. Guess you're not the only one out of the loop, YTTIK, even though I think the two of them are probably the most gorgeous things to come down the pike. They are like looking at a beautiful sunset. They bedazzle me with their beauty. But as Forrest Gump would say, handsome is as handsome does. Beauty only goes so far. But they seem to be okay people, though I don't know much about them. I confess I don't follow the stars or the gossip or think they walk on water. I vaguely recall Angelina Jolie saying she was bisexual in her younger years. So I guess she could have swung either way. But Brad Pitt own Angelina Jolie? LOL, I so don't think so. From what I've seen of them, it looks to be the other way around. I think Angelina Jolie runs the show in that relationship. Pitt follows her around like a puppy dog. I think if she told him to get down in the middle of the road and bark on all fours, he would. But I really don't think it's like that. They seem to be more egalitarian, respectful of each other, and compatible, at least in public, and really seem to genuinely enjoy being in each other's company. Who knows what goes on behind closed doors, but I've never ever heard of their exes or even the media say either one was an asshole or abusive with power. FCM. Well, you bring up an interesting point, Lucky, because this post was about the system and the institutions of law and marriage, not about individual couples, really, or whether individual men would abuse their power within marriage. But the fact of the matter is that if no man ever complained about an unconsummated or sexless marriage, the law wouldn't know or be invoked one way or another, and the marriage wouldn't be affected at all. Someone has to use these laws in order for them to have a legal effect on the marriage. The coercive effect is still there regardless, though. And Brad Pitt may be the greatest dude on the planet and not care about PIV one way or the other, but the unintended pregnancy kind of gives this one away a bit, doesn't it? However, it doesn't change the fact that these laws do apply, and that they are there for him to invoke or not. Male institutional and interpersonal power. And it doesn't change the fact that if Angelina wanted out of the marriage and tried to invoke these laws on her own behalf, it's not set up to give her institutional power or interpersonal power, or to benefit her at all, because she's female. For example, if she said he wasn't fucking her enough, he can invoke the good reason exception. Say he eventually becomes impotent. That's probably good enough for him to get his way, but if she had terrible pain on intercourse, for example, but could still be penetrated, and refused, good enough reason? Maybe not. Cherry Blossom Life says, in Sexual Politics, where Kate Millett basically invents the concept of a patriarchy, she argues that the individual personalities of the married couple are irrelevant when it comes to analyzing the power structure of male dominance. A woman might be a nagging fishwife that henpecks her husband, but perhaps she does so because she has reason to be frustrated. And perhaps the reason men behave so calmly is because they know they can always evoke the power of their class, male, to put a wife in her place, should they need to. This classic law that men have always used is threatened to fight for custody of the children, not because they actually want the children. They palm them off onto the mothers or new wife or girlfriend if they succeed in the court battle, but because they want to use it as a threat to keep their wives in her place. There are lots of not-so-subtle threats written into marriage laws in order to keep women married to men. The existence of these laws makes sense once you realize that most divorces are initiated by women. Marriage supports men and destroys women. Women cotton on to this fairly quickly, and therefore economic and legal precautions have been put in place by the patriarchy to stop women fleeing marriages in droves. Rainsinger says, quote, however, it doesn't change the fact that these laws do apply. Close quote. That's true. Exceptions are always there and held up as the norm, as standard tokenism. The laws are still strongly weighted for male advantage in intent, but also in enforcement or lack of enforcement. Men have the right to choose or not whether they invoke the laws. The laws support him whichever way he chooses. I certainly don't think nice guys should get cookies for being nice guys either. Holding up a high-profile egalitarian marriage is the same as holding up Janet Jameson, the porn star, in the media. People are meant to look up and think, if she can do that, I can do it too. As in, I can make working in porn work for me too. Holding Brad and Angelina up as an egalitarian marriage does the same thing for the media advertising propaganda machine. Women are manipulated into thinking they can make marriage work for them too. Well, reality doesn't quite work that way for a majority of women, and laws in their chilling way have a way of reinforcing the reality of male choices, good, bad, and ugly. Not that of the fantasies played out for the media by tokens and exceptional exceptions. Besides, I don't think either of them can act for shit, but that's just me. No accounting for some people's tastes. C says, I don't think nice guys should get cookies for being nice guys either. Quote, yes, thanks, Rain. That individual men get so sulky when anyone talks about men collectively is astonishing. They always want cookies for being non-rapists. As I've said in previous comments, I'm not even remotely interested in the exceptions. They're red herrings that serve as distractions from the reality that the world is unsafe for women, and this is unacceptable. YTTIK says, I wonder why they chose to get married at this point. I mean, they already have financial stability, they already have children, a relationship. People advocating same-sex marriage have a list of all these financial and legal reasons why they want the right to marry, but those really don't apply to this couple. There's nothing left but these misogynistic whispers like, he wants to make an honest woman out of her, or they need to show the world she's worthy. When you take away the legal and financial motivations, all that's left are these social pressures that imply there's something wrong with her if he doesn't marry her. Her loose morals can be redeemed if she just gets married. Her reputation will now be protected. He'll be staking a claim on her so we don't have this rogue woman running around outside the bonds of marriage, mucking up the social order. Maybe I'm just too cynical and all they want is to have a ceremony to declare their love for each other in front of all their friends, establish themselves as a committed couple. It's just that when you take away all the legal and financial motivations and the misogynistic social pressures, there isn't much left, is there? The desire to have a big party in celebration of their love is valid, but you could do that without making it a state-sanctioned marriage.